few years ago there was some information, some news kind of circulated in art newspapers, art journals, about an artist called Darko Maver, who I think I've mentioned before in one of those videos. And there was a kind of complicated backstory to it. He was Eastern European, he'd been arrested, went missing. There was a kind of political narrative attached to the work of this artist. And there's some information about some of his work and his exhibitions that he produced. And the work itself, if I can just describe it very briefly, was photographs of installations. And these installations took the form of rooms, hotel rooms, rooms in houses, in which he had constructed what seemed to be scenes of atrocities. I think he was located somewhere like in Serbia or the former Yugoslavia, somewhere like that. And so there would be photographs of what were constructed atrocity scenes, people with horrific injuries and who'd clearly been tortured and killed. But these were fiberglass models that he'd made and made to look like these torture victims. And there was documentation of these installations that he'd made. And I remember looking at this, and I was working at the university at the time where I used to do lectures, and I used to show some of this work to students, and it was very graphic. Some of it was quite difficult to look at. But one of the interesting, the whole point really of the Darko Maver project is that a few months after this set of journal articles were circulated, and how information about Darko Maver's political position, how some documentation of some of his exhibitions, after that had come out, it transpired that Darko Maver didn't actually exist at all. He was a fabrication by an art organisation that goes back, well, the name of the organisation is a string of zeros and ones, and I'm not going to pretend to get them in the right order. But they had produced this artificial character called Darko Maver, and produced his biography, produced this political problem he was having, and also fabricated these supposed exhibitions of photographs of fake atrocity scenes. But the point is, with all that, is that these photographs were not fake atrocity scenes at all. They were actual photographs of real atrocities, some of which had taken place in the conflict in the former Yugoslavia between the Serbs and the Croats, but other atrocity scenes as well. Basically downloaded from I think it's called rotten.com, a website that kind of specialises in difficult imagery. The reason why I mention this is that something really peculiar happens when you find that out. It certainly happened to me when I found that out. You know, you can look at these images. Sorry, the helicopter going overhead. I'll just let it go past before I continue. Okay, so you would look at these images, and they were slightly troubling, undoubtedly, but they were framed within the context of arts practice. So, you know, there was a really horrific picture of a woman who looked like she'd had her jaw removed and had a broom handle inserted into her vagina quite a long way. A horrible, horrible image. But you could kind of look at it when you knew it was an art installation, and you could make you had that critical distance where you could think about it as a commentary, or as a, you know, you had sort of different relationships to it. But when you found out that what you were actually looking at was documentary evidence of a genuine atrocity, it's absolutely horrific what comes over you, what came over me certainly, just this wave of, not exactly nausea, but just, I guess, well, the borders between you and the image just kind of collapse, and you get that sympathetic, empathetic, mirror neuronal wave of pain and horror and anguish of the human condition, I suppose. It's a very dramatic moment, or at least that's what I found it to be. Actually, I can still feel it now, just talking about it. I'm remembering these images, and it's affecting me even now. But one of the things I think is interesting, kind of academically from that, if I can distance myself again, is how what's happening there. What's happening there on a neurological basis, on a biochemical basis, on a biophysical basis. What's happening there, a psychological level, if you like. And one of the things I'm thinking about in that is in terms of what I've spoken about, what I've spoken about before on here, which is to do with these ideas of cognitive operators, which is this sense that the brain has a series of relatively formal routines that it carries out on the data of perception, but possibly the data of its own, that it produces itself through memory or whatever. What it does with that data, in order to make sense of it, to turn data into experience. And according to these ideas of cognitive operators, which are usually associated with Andrew Newberg and Eugene D'Aquili, is that, I don't know, there's half a dozen or 8 or 10 of these relatively straightforward routines, which, as I say, take data and do something with it. So the ones I've mentioned before, things like the holistic operator, which analogies look at what I'm looking at right now, which is this whole set of little green objects attached to sticks, and those sticks attached to a long stick, and that stick going into the ground. I unproblematically see that as a tree, but the unproblematic nature of that, the obvious of that, requires some explanation. And within the theory that I'm talking about, the explanation is there is some kind of operator, a holistic operator, a routine, which takes that set of data and makes a unitary, holistic sense of it. And there's as I say, there's a few other these operators that do different things to stuff. But in relation to the Darko Maver thing and these pictures of fake atrocities which turn out suddenly to be real, one of the operators they talk about is what they call the existential operator, which is the brain routine which assigns a quality of realness to what we're looking at. Assigns a quality of realness to what we're not necessarily just looking at, but experiencing. So, for example, if you wake up from a dream, the dream can seem real, but in a few moments of waking up, even though the perception, if you're managing to remember it, even though the kind of memory and the perception is there, you know it's not real, and that knowledge, that knowing it's not real, is because it's been assigned the valency of unreality by something like the cognitive existential operator. So in terms of the piece by Darko Maver, one understanding of that would be, and that wave of realization that comes over you when you realize you're looking at an actual atrocity of a real dead human being, is that the valency, the polarity, if you like, of that existential operator is suddenly changing. All the other operators are in place, putting it together as an image, allowing it to be distinguished from its background. All those things are in place. But the operator which was assigning it into the category of the unreal, in other words, art, has suddenly flipped over and in a space of a millisecond has assigned it to the category of the real, with all that implies in terms of its salience, its relevance, its distance from us, it's our appropriate kind of responses we should make to it, all of those kinds of things. I think that's probably the case with a lot of art. I think a lot of art, particularly 20th century art and beyond, plays with this idea that art is not life and has that cognitively assigned existential quality of the unreal attached to it, but is always kind of followed with kind of is it, so found objects and all the rest of the stuff that 20th century art has produced. I think a lot of that is to do with that. But Darko Maver's piece, for me at least, is certainly the most potent example of that process in action.